Talofa, namaste, big cheers to you all. Pack it up, pack it in. Let me begin. The Niche Case Variety Show, we are here in service of Aotearoa sport, in honour of Aotearoa sport, and for Aotearoa and Aotearoa sport with the Variety Show. Regular fucking Niche Case business here. Pretty wild smorgasbord buffet, all you can eat of Kiwi sporting notes, things, bits and bobs. Maybe you could say it's like a Kiwi shed, just a whole lot of shit. Who knows what you're going to find in the Kiwi shed? And it's an Aotearoa sporting shed. So whether you want to view it as a buffet or a sporting shed, it's what we're here to do. Just chat our way through a couple of the big Kiwi sports things that we're thinking about, that we are enjoying at the moment. And obviously, they're going to be way different to what you're seeing in other Aotearoa media outlets, because that's what we fucking do here at the Niche Case. Prior to this, we have recorded a big old podcast for our Patreon whānau who support us every month. All you need to do is just $1 a month, and you support the Niche Case on our mission to be of service of Aotearoa sport. And then every week, we deliver a big old podcast for our Patreon whānau. Today's podcast, we previewed the Blackcaps test series against India, and we had our first Wellington Phoenix game. So we're adding the Wellington Phoenix to our Patreon podcast roster, and we talk through the Phoenix's 1-1 draw against MacArthur FC, as well as a couple of National League tidbits as well. So if you do like the Niche Case, if you do want to support us and be part of the Patreon whānau, sign up to Patreon. No minimum. Well, there is a minimum, $1 a month. That's it. All good. If you want to do more, happy days. Shout out to you. But either way, you're getting some karma points from the universe, getting good vibes flowing between you and I, the listener and myself, as well as an extra podcast. That is the Patreon whānau. Hit up patreon.com/elnichecase, elnichecase. Enjoy the Patreon whānau today. Every Monday and Friday, we deliver an email banger, which is all the regular Niche Case content straight into your email, as well as extra yarns that are always pretty interesting. Pretty damn interesting. I wrote about the Blackcaps jersey sponsors. Why the fuck do the Blackcaps have 3 Indian brands on their jersey? Well, you'd read about that on the email banger on a Monday evening, as well as, what did you have, Wildcard? You bit of Charlize Ledger Walker, bit of Tai Webster, bit of football as well. Classic. Beautiful yarns on the email banger via Substack. Sign up to nichecase.substack.com. Every Monday and Friday, check your email inbox in the evening usually, and you'll have a fresh email from the Niche Case. Extra yarns, all the regular content. If you're a bit anti-social media, shout out to you. Just check your email. So sign up, thenichecase.substack.com. Boom. And we're always writing about Kiwi sports at the niche-case.com as well. Lots of deep analysis, information, informative, entertaining. It's what we do here at the Niche Case. So shout out to the website, the go-to. It's the meat and veg of this buffet, the niche-case.com. There's only one way to start the variety show, and that is with a dose of mindfulness to center us, to spark the mind into thought, and just spread the positive vibes. So Wildcard, can you please deliver some mindfulness to fucking get the party started?
Yeah, let's get the party started with 19th century French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who wrote a book called, he wrote several books, but he wrote a book called The Social Contract, which I have a slightly ratty copy of. It's had those bloody, like, you know, literal bookworms have got into it at some point. I must have got it secondhand from somewhere. It's got like little holes in a couple of the pages at the front, but I've been chipping away at that. And the first line of that book is quite like often quoted, which is man was born free and he is everywhere in chains. That sounds like something that's easily misinterpreted though, and I don't entirely know what it means. However, the second line of the social contract, I thought was much more sort of relevant to these purposes, which reads, "Those who think themselves the masters of others are indeed greater slaves than they." I think it's probably another one that works better if you put it in context. I do have an idea for how that works, but I'm curious as to what you might, because you all often come up with very interesting things off the cuff for these ideas that I hadn't thought of. Those who think themselves the masters of others are indeed greater slaves than they.
The thing that comes to mind when you said the second one was a lack of connection, which is a trend through a lot of these mindfulnesses. We're trying to connect with each other instead of trying to find differences and reasons why I don't like you or I'm different to you. I'm trying to connect with people. What do we have in common? What are our similarities? And there is no connection when you're a master of slaves. It's all based on differences. And if you're living your life by difference and separation, what's the punchline of that quote?
Those who think themselves the masters of others are indeed greater slaves than they.
Exactly. So if you're focusing on the difference and the separation, what does that make you? You're just a slave. You're just a slave to some of the dark arts. Let's just say that. Shout out Theo Von. You're a slave to the dark arts. Whereas looking for connection, looking for similarities, that is the opposite of dark arts. Is the best I can do.
White magic versus black magic. Yeah.
Don't frame it like that though.
Well, it depends on.
It's a bit racist.
You might. This is like. I mean, I'm sure Aleister Crowley was probably pretty racist, but this is more like his thing. This isn't him talking about that though. This is him, whatever. I like to see that quote as well. When I read that, I thought like this is very, very applicable in the way that people, like just as an example of how that works, the way that people become sort of, well, I'll keep the metaphor going, like slaves to their own ideology. Like they have certain ideas about the world, and then they begin to only see the world through that context rather than being open-minded because they're so committed to that thing. They think they think they're masters of this idea or whatever, and continually trying to see the world through that lens. It begins to master you, that idea, like the ideology. You see so many people who have like flawed thinking about various topics, where this is like they're clearly so committed to this one idea at the core of it that idea has come to rule them, because they can't see anything outside of the context of like this worldview that they've built for themselves. You see that all the time in so many contexts, and like a relatively unharmful one is in the sporting world, like all the time. Managers who play a football manager plays wants their team to play a certain way without adaptability. I'm thinking like, say, a Jose Mourinho type. He wants a certain type of player, a certain type of performance from his team. If the team is no longer fit for purpose to that, for whatever reason, a couple transfers or a couple injuries, or that type of person often lacks the adaptability to play in a different way, and then doubles down on like, no, we have to do this, and this, and it gets a whole lot worse, a whole lot quicker. Like that's just a relatively, in the scope of like the wider scheme of things, relatively harsh, just sports, but it's relatively harmless. But it's a very clear example of how that kind of thinking works, and it operates in many levels.
Hit us with it one more time there.
My phone's flipped around the other side. Those who think themselves masters of others are indeed greater slaves than they.
Boom. Boom, boom, boom.
Not talking about literal slavery there either. I don't think probably worth pointing out. It is more like a perception thing.
Let's go on to the sporting section of the show, because that was a very weird mindfulness section. Start our show with Chili Bin Hot Takes. We just drop a take. We just deliver one thing that is front and center of our Kiwi sports minds right now. What is it for you? Wildcard?
well, the weirder the better in every context. But
True.
so my 1332 take here is probably also a bit of a weird one. Weird in that I can't quite figure out. I look at like writing these flying Kiwis things every week and wrapping up the best performing Kiwi footballers overseas and whatever. A lot of it comes back around to Chris Wood and Ria Percival, who are New Zealand's lone regulars in the top flight of English men's and women's football. So the Premier League and the Women's Super League, the men's Premier League, the Women's Super League, and just like two supremely underrated Kiwi sporting icons who I just, this is my take. I just don't think they quite get the credit they deserve on the context of the level that they should. And, Chris Wood just scored his 50th Premier League goal in the week, and this is days after he flew back from scoring a match-winning double for the All Whites against the Gambia. 50 goals, 4 years ago, I wrote an article entitled, "Here is every goal ever scored by New Zealanders in the English Premier League," and at the time, I might actually share it later in the week in light of Chris Wood's milestone when there's a little bit more room in the schedule. At that time, there had been 16 goals. Chris Wood had scored one for Leicester. Winston Reid had scored a few. Ryan Nelson had scored a few. That was it. Since then, the Woodsman has scored in 10 plus goals in 4 straight Premier League seasons. He just became the 125th man to reach 50 goals in the Premier League era. 17 headers, 9 off his left foot, 23 off his right foot, 1 other, whatever that means. I think maybe bundled one of the hip or something like that. I don't know, maybe his chest. Those sort of stats, I don't know. I get the feeling that the wider country and perhaps even the Kiwi footballing community don't really comprehend exactly how extreme that is and won't until he finishes playing. And as for Ria Percival, she's the one New Zealander who's really forged a consistent career in the WSL. Scored a first goal a couple of weeks ago. He's played over 50 games. There's not really anyone else who's lasted more than 2 seasons in that competition playing regularly. Percival's been there about 4 years now. And the best thing about Ria Percival is that she's like a loaded shotgun of a player. She's got this pressing role in midfield for Spurs, where she's the person who instigates it. When there's a ball to be won, she shoots out of the shoots out of midfield and then starts the press that way. And she's amazing at that, and basically just plays with Ria Percival does not take prisoners, and when she's playing against these top teams, it's basically must watch television, because there's always at least one world-class player in the other team, playing against an Arsenal or a Man City or Chelsea or whoever. There's always at least one world-class player on the other team who at some point just wants to fight Ria Percival, who normally just shrugs it off and laughs and be like, get out of here. Then that's the thing. Ria Percival, Chris Wood, I just think they two of the most underrated Kiwi sports folk right now.
Boom. And they're underrated despite being the best, which is that's
pretty much
amazing.
I think that's a way out of sight, out of mind a little bit. Maybe those English games are middle of the night. People don't just don't get the coverage in the mainstream as they would. I don't know, but that's what we're here for.
My 1332 hot take is that 2021 is the year of Lydia Ko, and it's been a pretty massive year just for Aotearoa Wahine sport. Like you mentioned, Ria Percival, all the football stuff, the female football stuff is firing. And we had a Tokyo Olympics where I wrote about at the time how it was Lydia Ko, Valerie Adams, Lisa Carrington, and the Sevens women's team as well. Fantastic. That Tokyo Olympics was just the start of an immense second half of 2021 for Lydia Ko. And I believe her season is finished. Her year is finished on the LPGA Tour. She won the Vare Trophy, which is the best scoring average. And the big thing about Lydia Ko, as regular listeners and audience knows, consistency over headline grabbing wins. And if you have the best scoring average on the LPGA Tour, that means you are consistently the best. Now, Lydia Ko isn't ranked number 1, or she wasn't a champion of events or the overall champion of the season, whatever the fuck, but she was the most consistent player on the LPGA Tour. And that is boosted by her last 10 tournaments, including the Tokyo Olympics, where she had 8 top 10 finishes in her last 10 tournaments. Her last 5 tournaments, she finished tied 5th, tied 3rd, 1st, tied 2nd, and tied 9th, most recently on the weekend of the CME Globe Championship. So Lydia Ko, this is definitely the best year of her career, well, best year for a while. And when you think about the career arc of Lydia Ko, if I was Lydia Ko, I'd much rather be enjoying what she is now compared to what she did at the start of her career. Because if you think about it, the wins were at the start of her career, but right now she is the best player on the tour, most consistent player on the tour after multiple years of adversity. So for her to come out hot early in her LPGA career, go through a tough patch and re-emerge as one of the best players, if not the best player on the LPGA tour, that's amazing. And it's all happened in 2021. An Olympic medal, the only female golfer to win 2 Olympic medals. I think she's the only golfer generally to win 2 Olympic medals as well. And she has been amazing in the back end of 2021. 10 tournaments, 8 top 10 finishes, and a string of fantastic results to round out 2021. So female of the year, Wahine of the year, 2021, Lydia Ko. Big up to her, massive year, and onwards and upwards maybe for Lydia Ko into 2022. Let's get a dose of some statistical funk here, Wildcard, with our vitamin statistics. Inject us with some números.
Always keen for a bit of dosage. There were some changes made last week to the FIFA World Cup qualifying schedule. So, those home and away intercontinental playoffs of the past that the All Whites have had, the, All Whites versus Bahrain, the All Whites versus Mexico, the All Whites versus Peru, those aren't happening anymore. Starting with this immediate World Cup cycle that the All White, that every other country in the world, except for those in Oceania, have already started, which coming up in a couple of months. From now on, it's going to be a one-legged neutral ground game instead, which, to be honest, is probably better for the All Whites. So I think that suits them. I think they're more likely to be able to grind out a single, if they're playing against like a team like Peru again. I think a one-legged game in a neutral territory probably is more of an advantage to them than it would be for the opposition in that case. However, this adds to a deeper trend because those World Cup qualifiers were kind of the only time the All Whites ever played at home. So the last time that the All Whites played a game in Aotearoa was the 11th of November 2017. That was a 0 draw against Peru in that thing. Only 4 of their last 33 games have been in New Zealand, and all 4 of those were World Cup qualifiers, where basically they had to play them. They were scheduled by FIFA rather than being scheduled by New Zealand football. The last time they played a voluntary friendly at home was in 2014 against South Africa, which was, I believe that was when Neil Emblin was in charge as an interim manager. It was someone who made their debut in that game, but I can't remember who it was. It was the game after Ryan Thomas made his debut. And it's even worse. Like, this trend is one thing for the All Whites, but it's even worse for the football Ferns, because the last time they played in Aotearoa was in the 10th of June 2018. A little bit more recently, that was a 3-1 loss to Japan. The game famous, well, it's going to be a big homecoming, big celebration of women's football in the country. And then afterwards, Andreas Haraf, the current manager, said that, well, we have to park the bus against good teams so we don't lose 8-0 because we suck. So that put a dampener on things, and the rest was history after that. But after their South Korea trip this week that the Ferns are currently on, that game against Japan in 2018 will have been the only home game that they've played in their last 59 international fixtures. But they do have a home World Cup on the horizon, so there'll be at least 3 more come 2023. Whether we get any before then, who knows? Probably not.
Wouldn't mind another raucous New Zealand football crowd. Get the flares out, get the guns out, get just all the weapons out and riot and beautiful. Is that what football fans do in New Zealand?
Was what they did in Peru. Military flyover on the hotel the night before the game, 3 o'clock in the morning.
You know what should happen
fireworks.
Is because you know how the Waiheke football team, they get a bit ruckus. out there, a big Latino presence out in Waiheke. So maybe incorporate a couple of Latinos into the All Whites, take a home game to Waiheke, welcome to Aotearoa, bit of a ruckus, tough away trip for any team apart from the South American teams, and that's a stupid idea. My vitamin statistic...
Marco Rojas is, resurgent season for him. I believe he has Chilean heritage, is it? Marco Rojas, I think.
Maybe.
He could be the answer. Tap into the community.
Where would the most ruckus New Zealand football situation be?
Well, I think the most ruckus would be a bad kind of ruckus, if that's the case.
We're Kiwis, so it's all like gentle, good fun.
Well, the best I've seen is that Waiheke crowd. They're awesome. Like there's so much fun. They got the drums. They got the
No, but like if we're playing
a gentle herbal waft coming across the field as well from the hill.
If we're playing an all whites game in New Zealand, for the most like ruckus, like this is New Zealand football, rah! Where is it going to be the Cake Tin? Is it going to be Eden Park? Is it going to be Mount Smart? Is it going to be fucking University Oval? Are they going to turn into a football stadium? Like that kind of...
It would be Eden Park, even though they played the last couple in Wellington. I think they would play the next one in Eden Park. They're already sort of talking about that. Whether that would get you the best crowd, I mean, maybe. I've been at some like Eden Park games for cricket in particular, like Blackcaps games that have absolutely popped off. So there's definitely the potential. I think, Wellington are very good, but they don't necessarily get bulks of numbers. That's just a population matter. So you take it to the most populous city. I could see the logic in that.
I'm going to the Plunket Shield for a little bit of statistical glory here, wildcard, and I just want to point out, it's early summer in Aotearoa. Plunket Shield's been happening for a couple of rounds now, and this statistic is here to tell us about the situation of bowlers in the Plunket Shield at this time of year. Because the best spinner in the Plunket Shield right now is Michael Rippon, and he is 13th in wickets, 8 wickets, average of 46.5. Now, this isn't about Michael Rippon. This is about the lack of spinners in the Plunket Shield top bowling rankings. So there are 12 bowlers ahead of Michael Rippon, and they are all seam bowlers. And there are no spinners who have taken at least 4 wickets with an average below 45. So basically, the Plunket Shield at this time of year is all about seam bowling. And if you're a good seam bowler, you're going to be taking wickets. And if you're a spinner, you're probably going to be over in India playing Test cricket. Also, one more vitamin statistic here is Finn Allen, because he's still a strange cricketer that I'm trying to figure out here, wildcard. I've anointed him as Aotearoa's best slugger. Hasn't quite translated into Plunket Shield or first-class cricket. Fairly okay this season, 183 runs at an average of 22.87. No 50-plus scores, but he has had like a lot of scores over 20. So he's getting starts. However, the thing here with Finn Allen is that this is part of a wider trend. So last season, he averaged 6.66 in the Plunket Shield. He played one game in the summer of 2019 and 20, and he had a nice score. He had a 66 in there, but that was only one game. 2 seasons prior, first season, 2 games, average of 13. Next season, 18-19, 6 games, average of 25. So apart from his one-game season in 2019-20, where he averaged 40, Finn Allen has averaged 25 or less in 4 out of his 5 Plunket Shield first-class summers. And I'm just confused. I'm still trying to figure that out. So it's an interesting statistic. Let's go deep into the mangroves now, wildcard, where I believe you've come across a Webster brother in the back blocks of Lithuania.
Yeah, Tai Webster in Lithuania playing for a team called Zalgiris. He left the Breakers in some odd and unfortunate circumstances, a bit of cheeky bit of vaccine hesitancy costing him his spot there for very reasonable reasons from the Breakers' point of view. If your best ability is availability, and if you aren't going to be able to play in a number of Australian states, well, then, you know, you find someone who can. However, in the wake of that, he's really stumbled into just like, it's not, stumble is probably the wrong word. That makes it sound like it's accidental and sort of fortunate, but because Tai Webster is a very good player and he was enormously important for the Breakers last season. But he's ended up in just this incredible situation where he's playing for this Zalgiris team, who are a EuroLeague team. Like, this is the Champions League of basketball. This is the top tier. This is the best competition in the world outside of the NBA. The team he's playing for had a shocking start to the EuroLeagues. Before he got there, it caused them to shake things up. They had a bunch of injuries, a couple of players that weren't doing the job, cut a few guys, bring in a couple more. Tai Webster was one of the guys that came in. He actually replaced Emmanuel Mudiay on the roster. Remember him, lottery pick from the Denver Nuggets a few years ago, I think was quite famous because he didn't play college ball. He went and played in China. And in the wake of the Breakers' own attempts to get guys who don't want to go to college to come and play for them before going into the NBA, that's kind of an interesting coincidence. Zoran Dragic is another one who plays for his team. Zoran, brother of Goran, signed at a similar time to Tai Webster. And also the other name that's quite recognizable is Geoffrey Laverne, who former teammate of French big man, former teammate of Steven Adams's at OKC. He's now there, but he's one of the guys who got injured, so he's not actually playing. He's out for about 3 months, had to have surgery or something like that. So yeah, they lost their first 9 games in a row. They'd lost 7 when Webster joined. They lost 8 before he played his first game. His debut was then against Real Madrid, so straight in at the deep end, one of the best clubs in the world outside the NBA. Had 8 points in 15 minutes with a couple rebounds and an assist in that, and nice little cameo, a bit of garbage time in there because they did get smoked. That was their 9th loss in a row, but then got 2 points in 8 minutes with an assist against Panathinaikos in the next game, which was their first win of the season. And followed that up with 11 points in 11 minutes with a steal against Fenerbahce and another win. So since he's come in, they lost the first game he played, but they've won 2 in a row since then. Good vibes, huge crowds there in Lithuania. There's a couple great clips of what he's playing in front of. Couple wins, bringing some energy off the bench. I tried to find how many previous New Zealanders have played in the EuroLeague, and it was quite hard to find. I just did a quick search for the email and couldn't find anything. So I imagine there'd be 1 or 2 in the past. I don't know if someone like a Kirk Penny or something or whoever might have had a stint, but I wouldn't imagine there's too many. So hell of a twist in the tail for Tai Webster, because if he wasn't over there playing EuroLeague basketball, he'd have been playing in the NBL Blitz in front of mostly empty stadiums where Matt Walsh gets an entire section of the crowd to himself to yell at referees. And Breakers, obviously not going to have a home game for at least the first couple months of the season, and then here he is instead playing EuroLeague in front of a big raging Lithuanian crowd. It's really worked out quite well for Tai Webster.
EuroLeague, New Zealand Breakers, tough decision. What are you going to do? Definitely EuroLeague. Fucking ball out in Europe. Deep in the mangroves, I'm going with Abigail Gerken, 19-year-old. Canterbury batswoman. She had a fantastic weekend in the Halliburton Johnston Shield New Zealand Women's One-Day Competition. In her fifth first-class recognised domestic game, she hit a century, 108, and that came after a 50 on the Saturday. So Canterbury played a double header against Otago, and Abigail Gerken, 19-year-old, she hit a 50 and then 108. And this came after she hit a score of 9 earlier this year in her debut. And then in the 2 games against Wellington this season, she scored 14 and 0. That was the round when Amelia Kerr just went berserk and took 10 wickets in the weekend. So Gerken, that's a tough start. Comes up against Otago. Otago have a pretty good bowling attack themselves. We took in White Fern, Hayley Jensen, Kate Ebrahim's pretty nifty with the ball, and there are some really good young bowlers in that Otago Sparks team. Abby Gerken, 50 and 108, which is, to me, it just reflects the young talent in Aotearoa cricket at the moment on the women's side of things, especially in that South Island. Like, we're talking no Auckland to start the summer. Northern districts have just entered the equation. So there's been a lot of Canterbury. There's been a lot of Otago Sparks as well. And I've followed the Otago Sparks closely. Bright future Otago Sparks, who we've talked a fair bit about. Like, a lot of teams have good young players, and Abby Gerken's just one of them. So fantastic start to her summer, a 50, a century against a pretty good Otago outfit. And this game also featured Kate Ebrahim. And Kate Ebrahim is just incredible. I think she's played rugby. There's a photo of her playing hockey on Google as well. She's an amazing, athlete, sportswoman, and she is just casually averaging 60 plus in the last 3 seasons. So this is my Deep in the Mangroves wildcard, because at the younger end, we've got some really good talent that is always across the niche case. So if you want to go deeper into the young female cricketing talent in Aotearoa, just follow the niche case everywhere. You'll get all the information. Abby Gerken reflects that. Then you've got players like Kate Ebrahim, who are a bit older, they're a bit more experienced, and they are the players, I believe, who are far more beneficial to helping the White Ferns compete in the Home World Cup. Like, there is this immense pool of talent, younger, who aren't really going to help at a World Cup, because they need time to get into international cricket, as we've seen over the last 5 years. Bit of a gulf between domestic cricket and international cricket. However, through Abby Gerken and the bright future Otago Sparks, for example, fantastic signs of the younger talent. But then you've got a player like Kate Ebrahim averaging 60 plus in the last 3 seasons, and they are the type of players who are going to help the White Ferns compete at a high level in the World Cup if they're selected. So we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. There'll definitely be some mischief in the White Ferns selections, but in the domestic circuit, in the Halliburton-Johnston Shield, there is a nice balance between fresh performances from the young players and the best players in Aotearoa holding it down in the one-day competition. Not to mention Sophie Devine, who's leading the Perth Scorchers to the final in the Women's Big Bash League and is once again dominating the Women's Big Bash League. So shout out to Sophie Devine, shout out to Kate Ebrahim, shout out to Abby Gerken, and let's be honest, just shout out to all the Wahine playing in the Halliburton-Johnston Shield, making it a fun old time. Question time. My question to you, Wildcard. Which Blackcap spinner is going to take the most wickets in 2 test matches against India? World Test Championship starts again. Blackcaps have a massive challenge against India in India. Which spinner is going to take the most wickets for Aotearoa?
That is, I think, guys, I think it's quite an easy question to answer. You did just get me thinking, though, talking about White Ferns / Blackcaps side to side. Just is a little bit weird that the White Ferns tend to trend very young in terms of players they bring in, whereas the Blackcaps had a lot of success bringing in more experienced players. There's a little bit of a contrast going on there, and it's a contrast also in terms of results. But in terms of who's going to take all the wickets as a spinner in India, it's it's Ajaz Patel, no doubt about it. For the reason that I think he's the number 1 spinner, I think he's the best spinner, but I'll chuck in another reason as well. Spinners generally more effective taking the ball away from the bat. Ajaz Patel, left arm tweaker, taking it away from the right-hander. What is one thing that the Indian batting order famously has basically none of? Left-handers. You want a left-hander in the Indian batting order, you basically got to wait till Ravi Jadeja comes in. I think Axar Patel is a left-handed batsman as well. More of a bowling arounder though. But like you don't get left-handed bats generally, or there's maybe only one until you get to the all-rounders in the middle. So Ajaz Patel is probably gonna get a decent amount of overs bowling at the type of batsman he should favor himself to have more success against. that's an absolute lock for me. I reckon not only is that the case, but I think if it's not the case, the Blackcaps are not going to have any hope in the series.
Ajaz Patel, leading wicket take for the Blackcaps in India. Lock it in. What's your question?
My question is, in light of what I was saying about Chris Wood and Ria Percival being underrated Kiwi sporting stars at the start of this podcast, I'm just gonna generally ask who else you think would be in that category. Like, who else from your chosen beats, maybe beyond that? Like, who else would you chuck in that territory?
Well, in keeping with my rundown of today's show, I'm going to give you a double layer answer.
Please do.
Two things come to mind. Like the simple ones, we're talking Lydia Ko, because people only worry about her when she wins and they ignore the fact that she's consistently among the best. Then we're also looking at like James Fisher Harris, those type of players. Premiership winner James Fisher Harris, and maybe Northland's best definitely rugby league player, like Abby Ersig's from Auckland?
She is.
So she's
Whangarei,
so she's probably a couple of notches ahead of Fisher Harris at the moment, but Fisher Harris is criminally kind of underrated in the NRL. But the thing that really stuck with me, Wildcard, is the younger generation, because I just mentioned it with women's cricket. We're seeing it with basketball. We're seeing it with the junior rugby league coverage that we do. And I look around all of our Aotearoa sports that we cover at the niche case on our beat, and I think the entire younger generation of athletes coming through is underrated. And that's my doosra to your question. Your question's asking for the Lydia Ko, Fisher Harris type of characters. My doosra is younger generation. The younger generation is incredibly talented. They are true blue Kiwis. They're all down to earth. They're all, about the mahi. They're all about excellence and being the best that they can be as a person, as an athlete. And they're all fucking dominating whatever sport they're playing already. We've seen it with the All Whites. We're starting to see it with the football Ferns. Charlize Ledger-Walker is amazing over in the NCAA. Like, all these little pockets have young Kiwis, let alone Kiwi NRL. The whole Kiwi NRL takeover is predicated on the young players coming into the NRL over the next 5 years. So every pocket that I explore, there are young Kiwi athletes adding to the equation. And if you look at the headlines, if you look at the All Blacks lost the game, holy fuck, oh my God, if you're that type of Kiwi sports fan, you're not looking at a young generation coming into the mix. Let me tell you, younger generation's fucking coming into the mix, and that's for damn sure. So I'm going to go with younger generation, underrated. You got to tap in. You got to tune in to the niche case to really find that out.
I wonder if Ian Foster should be in that category too.
What do you mean?
Just from what you're saying, like underrated, because apparently he's gone from being like the sturdy All Blacks coach to being the most bumbling, out of his depth guy that has ever been. You sort of like read the comment sections and stuff at the moment.
Do you know what's weird about the All Blacks is I wrote this in the email. So plug our email, Monday email, nichecage.substack.com. I think the All Blacks have scored 50 points in 5 or 6 games this year. They've also lost 2 games in a row. So how anyone can have like opinions on the All Blacks, I've got no fucking clue, because it's just a random year of sport. Like, you can't come to any grand conclusions when a team is winning, like is scoring 50 points in 5 or 6 games, which is almost half their games this year, and they've lost 2 games in a row. Like, it's a bit of both. Who gives a shit, like, fucking hell.
It so often is a bit of both in those kind of things. Like, people just waver from one extreme to the other, and the reality is that it's a little bit of A and a little bit of B. It's how things work. The world's more complicated than people give it credit for.
Musical jam.
Yes.
I'm going to come out with the best song of 2021. Earl Sweatshirt, 2010. come to think of it, 2010, that's when we started university. So good year, 2010.
Yeah, it must have been.
Earl Sweatshirt 2010, new song, new video. The beat is just ridiculous. Like, it's so intricate, so delicate, so smooth, goes hard, everything. And then you've got Earl Sweatshirt, who's like, his raps are just everything as well. Maybe that's the theme of the podcast. The All Blacks are just everything right now, and no one can figure them out. So everyone's fucking shitting their pants, let alone the fact that everyone talking about the All Blacks is kind of getting into New Zealand Warriors territory of like fear and trauma and like, oh my God, they're going to be shit because they lost the game, like that type of thing. But it's everything. Right now, the All Blacks are literally everything. So how can you come to a rational opinion? I can come to a fucking rational opinion about Earl Sweatshirt because this song 2010 is everything that is good about hip hop music. It's experimental, it's abstract, it's thought-provoking, it's entertaining, it sounds good. I like it. What's your musical jam?
Other than repeating the things I said last week, which are all still relevant because I'm still listening to a lot of those albums that I mentioned then. But there's a new Robert Plant and Alison Krauss album, which I'm quite interested to have a peek at because just find Robert Plant's solo career the most fascinating thing. Like, I mean, I'm literally wearing a Led Zeppelin shirt right now. He like this just like god tier rock star in his first part of his career, but then once he finished that, like he just like I'm done. I've done that. That's a chapter of my life that I don't need to relive. I mean, he had that one-off reunion concert. He had a couple albums with Jimmy Page, but it was just them with others. Not John Bonham was dead by then, obviously, but like this occasionally getting close to that, but it's definitely not the same thing as what Led Zeppelin was. He's just like he tried to be a little bit sort of like poppy in the 80s, but then by the end of the 80s he was doing like experimental world music, and then he had this album with Alison Krauss, who's like a bluegrass singer, which is just like sort of soft, just like crafty songs, and it was super successful. And about 20 years later, now they've done a second one. I just find that the whole Robert Plant thing was super, because he could have made, like, the trend with those boomer rock stars is like, just get the band back together, tour for eternity, $500 a ticket, make like absolute bank. Robert Plant's just always been like, I've done that. I don't want to do it again. Like, the amount of money he's probably turned down from that is crazy. So big respect to that dude. Otherwise, the new Snail Mail album is fantastic. Love that one. And yeah, definitely still banging that Idols record too.
Bonus segment. Who are your non-football underrated Kiwis?
Well, as you were saying that, and then you did end up mentioning her, but I don't think you can count Charlize Ledger-Walker yet as playing college stuff. I mean, maybe you can. Like, didn't make the case. She's one of the top college players. She's a top 20 college player in America right now. And that's not me saying that. That's ESPN's preseason ranking saying that. But it's still college ball stuff. I think maybe we get into like most underrated status in like 2.5 years time when she gets into, and I'm saying when, not if, when she gets into the WNBA. Because this is probably a criticism of wider Kiwi sports media, but I just can't picture a way in which her exploits will be covered even a fraction of the extent that Steven Adams gets in the NBA. I just don't think her in the WNBA would get the same level of acknowledgement or focus. And even what Steven Adams gets is crap, because it's a straight, like the news will be like, and in the latest, Steven Adams had 6 points and 9 rebounds, and for the Memphis Grizzlies, we'll play one Twitter highlight clip of a dunk. And the Grizzlies lost or whatever. Or back in the day, it was like Steven Adams had a double-double today for OKC, like the real focus on double-doubles. I don't know what that is, but there's no context to anything. It's just like, here's a one highlight clip at the end of the news, and Steven Adams did this. It's not great coverage, but I don't think Charlize Ledger-Walker would get even a fraction of that in the WNBA. I just don't think there's much of an understanding of the level that is. Like, this is the equivalent. This not like the NBA's up here, WNBA, like these are next to each other. They're parallel. As you were saying that, it's not quite an answer to your question, but that's what I was thinking, is that when she gets to that point, when, not if, when she gets to the WNBA, I think she's going to be by far the most underrated, because I don't know that New Zealand sporting media right now is, and maybe she'll change that. Like maybe her presence will alter that, but I don't think it's very well tooled to understand the context of that.
And if you're in the basketball community or any of these other communities, you know how many others like Charlie Sledger-Walker are playing basketball, like young Kiwi women are playing NCAA basketball.
For sure, yeah.
Like it's a ridiculous
There's actually
amount.
a lot more women than men playing at Div 1 colleges this season as well.
And all that stuff's happening. So if you're in the cricket community, the rugby league community, the football community, the basketball community, whatever it is, you know this is happening. And it's,
yeah.
But then if you're from another community checking in, it's like, because I just said, because you're talking about Charlie Sledger-Walker, and I'm thinking, well, there's also like a shitload of other players just like her from New Zealand doing not quite to the same extent, but competing in a similar environment, which goes back to the whole underrated idea.
Yeah, for sure.
The younger generation that is getting these, getting their foot in the door, getting a little bit of in the mix. This podcast was definitely in the fucking mix. It was a weirder the better. It's the variety show. How about that? Weirder the better. And that's what we do. We'll be back probably on Thursday with another episode of the Niche Cast. So stay tuned. Who knows what's going to happen on the Niche Cast? Go a bit longer. We'll zone in on a few topics. Regular Niche Cast business. Stay beautiful. Raise your mana. Think about your mana as like if you're a batsman, you're just trying to score runs. You're a basketball player, you're trying to get the buckets. You're a footballer, you're trying to get touches on the ball, make passes, do your tackles, do your mahi. That's what mana is. You're just adding runs. You're just adding mana. You're ticking the scoreboard over with mana. Getting your mahi done, spreading the good vibes, building your mana. So raise your mana. Stay beautiful. Kia kaha. Cheer.